I'm walking through Santa Rosa High School right now. I was supposed to graduate here 30 years ago, but I dropped out my senior year because I was so miserable. And I couldn't even walk over here for probably a decade. I couldn't even walk past this school for a decade. That's how miserable this place made me. Anyway, what happened was my junior year, I was not feeling good the end of the year. And I was like, if I feel like this in the beginning of senior year, I'm not going to keep going to school. I'm going to do homeschool. I'm going to do whatever I can, right? So my first week of senior year was even worse. It was just, I just felt horrible. So I dropped out and I went to this like continuation school right around the corner called Ridgeway. But I actually was cool with it, but like I think I just didn't like being in my hometown, because like one time I was like walking home and somebody spat on me from the car, and just like I felt like this feeling of like having to get out of my hometown, right? So in November I took a Greyhound cross country and I stayed in Vermont for a couple months, and I came back home for Christmas time, and then I felt really weird because all my friends were still in school and I wasn't in school. So I just like worked odd jobs and felt weird that while everyone else was like in their senior year. I even went to Turnabout because some girl asked me out for Turnabout. I don't even like, it's so weird because I went to Turnabout and it was kind of awkward. Anyway, I had this girlfriend at the time, and she was a friend of the girl that I went to Turnabout with. And she felt like I was being too affectionate with that girl, and it really like, I think that's kind of when like she decided I wasn't for her, you know, maybe it was not a smart move on my part, but anyway, so but I didn't really think it was over, but I think at that point I was probably over with her. But I held on to it in my mind for a while. So anyway, and then when my friends graduated in June of 94, 30 years ago, coming up in like 2 months, 30 years ago. No, actually 1 month. It's already May. I even went to my friend's house and they were having this get together with the parents, and the parents didn't even know I dropped out. They were like, oh, so you going to the, I don't know. Somehow I slipped out that I wasn't going, that I didn't graduate, and they kind of looked all glum and like, oh my God, you didn't graduate? That kind of thing. You know, I just felt like a big loser, you know? I mean, so anyway, that summer of 94, I started going back to the JC, the junior college. So I wanted to like pick up my education, and I went and took I signed up for a psychology class, and I did okay in it. I got like a B+. So I continued to do, the next semester I did like full time. I had like a mixture of fun classes and, harder classes, but, I did okay. Like I did like probably like B- average or so. But what happened then was I got a chance to go to India, and I was only going to go for 3 weeks. But I ended up staying in India for 4 months, so I didn't end up going that next semester. So, So that started off my love of travel. I think that like when I went to India, it made me realize that like my life wasn't so bad, and that like there's a lot of people that have it harder than I do. And I kind of learned meditation, and I sort of feel like in a way India kind of saved me, because I had such a crazy adventure there that it kind of took me out of my depression. And maybe like if I hadn't had that whole like hard life thing, that maybe I wouldn't have had the strength to travel around by myself in India, you know? So, when I came back, from India, was in, I was 19, and, I came back in around April of 95, and, I sort of felt restless, you know, and my older brother lived in North Carolina, and he said I could come out and visit. And I almost feel like it's divine providence, because in the newspaper, people used to be able to sell plane tickets, and there was a plane ticket to Raleigh, North Carolina, where my brother lived. It was like $75. So I felt like it was like divine providence for me to go to North Carolina. So, I went to North Carolina, and I just started working my ass off, just saving money. I just wanted to save money and get a car. That was my goal, right? So I started working at Jersey Mike's. I didn't really like it that much, but I kept that. And then I got a job at Salsa Fresh. And then I got a job at Whole Foods. Or that might have been, no, I got a job at Winn-Dixie. I had like a job at Winn-Dixie. I had a job at Whole Foods. I had the coffee shop job. I worked at an old folks home. Like within 6 or 7 months, I saved about somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money. But in 1995, for somebody that never had any money, pretty much, it was a lot of money for me, you know. Part of the time I was saving the money, I was paying $200 a month in rent, and I just was like working all day and night jobs too. So I don't know if I've ever worked that much again in that small period of time like that. I've done it sort of like when I worked in Hawaii. A few years after that, I worked a lot too, but I worked really hard just because I had a goal of getting a car. So late 95, my two older brothers were there in North Carolina, and a couple of my brother's friends, and they all decided to move to Hawaii. So in late 95, also I got booted out of my $200 a month place because the guy got pissed that I was lighting incense. So I was like, I took that as a sign to go back to Santa Rosa. Also that, like, you know, my friends and my brothers were leaving the state. So I left back to Santa Rosa in 1996. And 1996 is when I bought my first car for $450. I got a Toyota Corona 1976, same year I was born. So I got a Toyota Corona, and I started trying to start a band. So I put up these like flyers around, and that's where I met my friend Darwin, who played drums, and this guy Marty, and we started trying to do a band, but it kind of didn't work out. So that's when I decided to move to Los Angeles in 1997, but my car was broken. So I moved to LA in the beginning of 1997, and I didn't have a car, and a week later I turned 21. So then I stayed, like that year I stayed in Los Angeles, and I wanted to play music, but then I started getting into acting, and I took some acting classes, and I did a bunch of extra work on TV shows, and then I got a car again, and I was living in Venice Beach for a long time, and then I worked for this coffee shop that Bob Dylan owned in Santa Monica for a while, and I ended up moving out of the place I was at because they had all these plumbing issues, and so like I get really gross water in my sink and stuff, so I moved into somebody's living room in Hollywood, but then that was not very fun. So then I started, like, it was like Christmas time and I was like living in my car. So then I saw that as a reason to go back home, right? So I went back home late 97, 21 years old. Quite a lot of kind of like weird life experiences, but I was ready to really work hard again. And I got a job in Marin at this like group home kind of thing, and I was going there, and I was actually like making pretty good money because I was doing a lot of overtime. And in the summer, I started going to Academy of Art because I was like, well, it'd be cool to learn film, right? And I think that was a mistake. I should have stayed focused on my music, but I was thinking about certain like people in music that went to art school or film school, and I was kind of like thinking, well, it's good to branch out into the arts, and I wanted to learn screenwriting and stuff like that. But I just went for the summer because then I got a role in Biloxi Blues as an actor in theater, and so I did that, and I really liked acting, although that wasn't always a positive experience also in that play. But I met like some good friends, somebody that I'm still friends with from that play. And I was happy to do theater again because I'd done theater when I was younger and I liked doing theater. Although I haven't had that good of an acting role since then, so I probably should do more theater sometime. But anyway, I met somebody in the play who had worked at Sonoma County Airport. And I thought that would be fun because if you work for the airport, you get flight benefits. So I actually applied to Sonoma County Airport to work for SkyWest or United, right? United and SkyWest are kind of like the same company, right? But I put on my second choice, like they're like, if you can't work here, is there a second choice? And I put Los Angeles as my second choice. So then so 1999, I was signed up to go back to community college, right? I was taking like English class. I was taking like a bunch of things I needed to take, right? But then I got hired in Los Angeles for April. So I actually was like, I know it's really crazy, but I was kind of like flying back for some of my classes, but I kind of had like a discount on the flights. So I wasn't coming back for every class, but I flunked one of the classes, but the other classes I actually passed because I came back enough to where I was able to pass it. And I started working at United Airlines, but I didn't have a car. And it was kind of, so I was working like swing shift training, right? From like 3 p.m. to like 11 or midnight, somewhere around there. And what happened was I got used to just going at that time because it wasn't that hard to make it on time when you're doing the swing shift, right? But then they switched my shift over to 6 in the morning. So then I had to start like getting up at like really early because I had to take the bus to work, right? So also I started to not really like the job after the training. When I was doing the regular working, I didn't like it as much because like people were complaining a lot about it, and it was just a lot of negative energy, and it was really hard to deal with customer service people at an airport at Los Angeles, airport. And then like I was late once, and they told me if I was late again, I would get fired. And I remember my brother was in town, my older brother, and we were like hanging out where I was staying, and like I just stayed up way too late, and he tried to drive me there to get me there on time, I remember, and I was just late, and they fired me, you know. I mean, it was my fault. I remember I was trying to get a car back then because I was like, shoot, I need a car, you know. I'm not, I was thinking about getting a loan and getting a car, but I didn't end up getting a car and I got fired. So then I wasn't able to do that. So, God, now that I think about it, I actually remember going and trying to get a loan for a car, but I decided not to do it. So then what happened was I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing music. I have a few bucks saved up from the working. I could go for a little while, right? But then my friend I lived with was starting to get concerned because he was like, well, how are you going to pay the rent if you don't have a job now, right? And I'm like, well, I'll figure something out, right? But then I met somebody who said I could like split his studio for really cheap, but that wasn't a good idea, and that turned out kind of bad, actually. So anyway, I started going to the Unurban coffee shop in 1999, like a lot. Like I was playing my songs there. I met my friend Burpo there. And I even played bass for Burpo a couple times. He played drums for me a couple times. It was kind of a good community, but I didn't have a car. The person I was living with was like, turned out to be like not that easy to get along with, you know, and he wanted me to give him rides when his car wasn't working. He was working midnight shift, and so he would want to sleep, and he'd get mad if I woke him up, and then he'd want me to, I don't know, I don't even want to talk about it, but it was negative, right? And he got pissed when I wanted to leave. I even said, okay, I'll give you my amp and stuff, you know. So I don't know, I was a bit of a pushover back then anyway. But so then I stayed in LA, and I just kept trying to play music out there, but I was just kind of like, I was like suffering, you know. I was suffering really bad, and I ended up staying with my aunt and uncle for a little while. And I remember when Y2K was happening, and I flew back I think I flew to Oakland, and then I went to Santa Rosa. And I remember walking around, you know, New Year's Eve, and I was like, I think I'm just going to stay here again, right? So then I'm back in Northern California again, right? So the year 2000, I'm in Northern California, and what do I see in the paper? But they're hiring for Sonoma County Airport, right? So I applied for that, and I told her I was honest with her that how I got fired at United because I was late, you know. And she was cool. She hired me anyway. And I started training there. And it was actually a lot funner working there in a way, because it was what's called cross-utilization at the smaller airports. You learn more things and you do more things because you have more time you don't have to just do customer service, right? You do customer service, but then you also run around and, you know, you get the planes off, you clean the planes, you drive around on the Kubota tractor, you check people in, you know, you do the ticketing. So it was kind of fun, but and I ended up like traveling a lot, because like I would travel for like, not just for training, but since I could fly on SkyWest for free, like on my days off, I would even go to LA or even like hop over to Seattle. Although that was usually when I had a couple days off, because with Seattle, you had to do a couple, you couldn't usually fly straight there. You had to kind of go like Portland or whatever. But I ended up going to Seattle quite a bit, meeting some people in Seattle. And and then I remember like, okay, so, but then what happened was there was a lot of infighting between this group of women. One group of women was more like liberal, and one group of women was more conservative. And they would have these fights at work, right? And a lot of times, like, you get put in the middle of different arguments. And also there was somebody that was hired there that was a really bad worker, and I felt like the person would make things harder on me when I was working, and it wasn't fair, I felt like. And also what happened was, okay, I started full-time, right? And I was going to get the full-time benefits and stuff, but then it was taking a while to get the benefits. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to drop down to part-time, because if I'm not getting the benefits, I'd rather work here part-time, And, but then the manager started giving me full-time hours, even though I had part-time benefits. And so I kept saying, okay, well, if you're going to give me full-time hours, I want the full-time benefits after all. And she kept on dragging her heels and not giving me the full-time benefits. And I kept asking her for it. And she started being like not cool to me, And so I actually talked to one of the ladies about what I should do. And she said to write a resignation letter if I wanted to quit. Part of the reason I wanted to quit was, A, there was another job in Sebastopol that I felt like I could get that paid a lot better. B, what was I going to say? Oh, my brother offered me to stay in Hawaii because he was living in Hawaii, but him and his friend were going to go tour Asia, right? So he said that I could stay in his room for a few months while he was gone, and I could get work there, right? So I decided to do that. So after I just saw a car that looked exactly like the car that I used to have. That's crazy. That's so interesting. That's exactly like the car I had before. So I gotta have this light here. So I went to Hawaii, and what happened? My brother left, and but I ended up living at this house that was it was about 20 miles from the Hilton, which is where I wanted to work. So my brother's friend let me use his car, so I was able to use the car, and I also would sometimes bike to work. But I first worked at the Outrigger in the morning. So what I was doing was that, and then I tried to get a job at the Hilton, and I got a job at the Hilton. So what happened was I was working in the morning at the Outrigger, and then I was working evenings at this other job and just socking away the money, right? And it was a mixture of I liked it and I didn't like it. I kind of I felt a little lonely with my brother not being there and stuff, but I made some friends there a little bit, but it was kind of yay and nay. I liked Hawaii a lot. I liked being in Hawaii, but when my brother came back, then the house got more crowded, and then I started staying with someone that lived in the next house over. But I don't know, there was just some reasons I didn't want to stay there. So I don't know, I had saved probably about $5,000 at that point, and I was ready to go do some more adventures, So I actually was thinking about moving to Seattle, and I had actually bought a car, so I had a car to go back to when I went back. I went back early 2000, somewhere around February in 2000. And I drove to Seattle around March, I think. March, April, somewhere around there. And anyway, so now I'm what is this, 2001 now. 2001, so we're 7 years after I should have graduated, and I end up seen this flyer that said you could go to Israel for 2 weeks. So I ended up going to Israel in May of 2001. I went to Israel for 2 weeks, and I came back, and there was all these people, there was an intifada going on at the time, right? And a lot of people, when I came back from Israel, would get in my face about how bad Israel was and stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? I was just like, it just confused me, right? And so anyway, I don't know. I was like, still not really a happy camper at that point. I was just like, God. And so 2001, I came back in the summer. And I came back to Northern Cal. I start working again. I worked at like a place where they made guitars. And then I worked a couple group homes again. And I had some really negative experiences working for the group home. So I decided I would never work at a group home again, because the people that ran it were total jerks. Anyway, I don't want to go into that right now. But I was also working as a waiter at a Greek restaurant. And when I saved a few $1,000s, I decided to go to Europe. I'd never been to Europe. I was 26 years old. I had a friend that was going to be in Macedonia, because that's where he was from. Him and his wife were going to go to Macedonia that summer. So he said, if you go to Europe, come to Macedonia. So what I did was I got a really cheap flight to Brussels. This is in probably like August, maybe late July, August, somewhere around there, 2002. So I got about $100 flight from Brussels to Athens, and then I took a train from Athens to Skopje, which is in Macedonia, and then I took a bus to this town called Ohrid. So I was like really stoked, because I was 26, I'd never been to Europe. I felt like, wow, I really get my travel bug going again, right? 26, I get so let's see, I'm in Macedonia. I stay in Macedonia for like a week, and I actually rented a place instead of staying with my friend, because I could rent a place for like $8 a day. So I was like, I'd rather just have my own place, right? So then I went back to Skopje, and I got a train, and I went all through like Romania, and like I went to Poland, okay? So I spent 1 week in Krakow, right? And I went I met a woman that I wanted to date on an online site somehow. And I met up with her, and it just didn't work out. So I was like bummed, right? And then when I took a train to Prague, I stopped through Budapest for a little bit, but I went to Prague, and I started like meeting women there, and so I started like having some experiences with some women there, which is cool, and but I don't know, I just felt really restless. I wanted to go see lots of parts of Europe. I wanted to go to Paris, so I got a ride to Paris. I got a ride to about an hour outside of Paris. There was this company called Allostop where you can get like ride shares. So I got a ride in this like courier truck. We went through Germany. That was my first time in Germany. We stopped in Heidelberg. And then in France, I took the train. And I remember I got out at Café du Nord, I think it was, in Paris. That was my first time ever in Paris. And I stopped in a all Muslim kind of like hostel. Like everyone was Muslim there, and I don't know, it was fine, but I was like, oh, I'd never really experienced that before, and then like I stayed at some other hostels. I met this girl from Toulouse, and it was kind of bizarre because one of the hostels was like unisex, so you go in the bathroom and there'd be like women in there. It was just kind of bizarre, but so anyway, I'm in Paris. I go to like, I didn't go to some of the, I went to the Louvre. I went to like some art museums like the Chagall. I did not go inside of the Eiffel Tower. I just kind of walked to it. So then when I was walking around Paris, I saw this sign for going Paris to Dublin for like, pretty cheap, right? So I was like, oh, I'd love to go to Ireland, right? So I got a ticket to Ireland, and long story short, I ended up staying in Ireland for about 5 or 6 months. I really met a lot of people in Ireland. I saw the band JJ72 there. I saw Sinead O'Connor there. I worked at a bookstore. I did like a bicycle career job. I worked at a pizza place in Ireland. But when I was there almost 6 months, there was the guy at the bookstore said that they had to let me go because I didn't have papers and all that kind of thing, But I went through a lot in Ireland. I went through kind of like a religious thing, kind of like a Christian baptism and all this kind of thing, But I also like questioned it a lot. I don't know. I was going through a lot of stuff, And so my brother came out there in Christmas, and then we were there another month or two, and then we decided to go traveling. We went to Amsterdam, and then through Allostop we got a ride to Budapest, but it was really cold. It was like February. Now it was like 2003, right? It was really cold, and I said, you know what, I bet you like Prague better. So we went to Prague. We stayed there for probably 2 weeks, I think. Not exactly 100% on how long. And then we went back to Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam, we flew back to the States in around, I believe it was early March of that year. So now I was 27. I'd had all this traveling under my belt. I was like, what am I going to do now when I got back to the States? I started kind of hanging out more in the city. I started staying in Berkeley, and I don't know. So 2003 was kind of like where did I work? I worked a few different places. But then I started going to a community college in Berkeley. Oh yeah. So I started living in this place called El Sobrante. And I had a car, but I remember I spent like $1,000 on getting my car fixed, and then it like broke down on me the next day, and I got rid of it. So that was the beginning of my car troubles, right? So then I had a friend named Rolando, and he had a place to rent in San Francisco. But it was kind of crazy because he was all the way by 46 and Fulton, like way out by the beach, and I was still going to Berkeley, to school in Berkeley, right? So it was a bit strange because I was actually like taking the BART all the way to Berkeley, just to take these, like, I was taking screenplay writing. I was taking some kind of economics class. I don't know. I didn't even remember. What else? I don't know. But it was the first time that I got student loans. So that's when I started going. Actually, no, I got student loans when I was at Academy of Art also. But I paid those off. But that's when I started having student loan debt, was more that year, you know. Yeah, I started having student loan debt. It wasn't like tons of money, but it was also like how I was able to kind of like live for a little while. And so yeah, I'm 27, I'm living in San Francisco. I actually had started playing music with my friend Carlos when I was 26, so we played some times in San Francisco, played a few little gigs around town, not very much, but so I'm 27, I'm living in San Francisco, 2003, and then something happened with the house where they sold it or something. I had to leave that house. So I was trying to figure out where I was going to stay, right? And I started thinking I was going to stay with a friend in Berkeley, and I was going to get this temp job. But my friend Darwin was back in Santa Rosa, and he convinced me to start playing music with him and hanging out there, right? So I started like playing music with my friend. Somehow now it's like 2004, right? So it's 2004. I start hanging out with some friends. Oh yeah, sometimes I would live in Rohnert Park too. There, even in between, sometimes when I was back home, I was living in Rohnert Park because I had some friends that stayed at this house, and a lot of times there'd be rooms open. So a lot of times I was staying in Rohnert Park when I was in Sonoma County. So 2004, I'm hanging out with my brother who's living in Nevada. I was hanging out with Darwin, my friend Dan, and then there was just a lot of things that happened with things that I got upset about, and so I decided to start working at this Radio Shack, right? I was like, okay, I just got to get a job again because I'd been kind of floundering. So I was like, I got to get a job, save some money again, right? So this is like the back and forth thing. It's like, you know, work, no work, you know. So I start working at the 2004. So that was 20 years ago. I started working at the Santa Rosa Mall, and I started feeling kind of old at that point. Even though I was just like 27, I started feeling, because like a lot of the people I was working with were probably like, you know, late teens, early 20s. I started feeling kind of like the old guy, except for the manager, right? And I worked there for a few months, and then like I got this idea where like, hey, I wonder if I could like transfer to San Francisco. Then I could like work at a Radio Shack in San Francisco. And then I could move to San Francisco with a job, right? But it wasn't a good idea because in Santa Rosa, I did really well with the phone sales because I was the only guy besides one other guy that spoke Spanish, and there was a lot of Spanish speakers that came in to buy phones. When I moved to San Francisco, it was a Russian neighborhood, and almost everybody I worked with spoke Russian, and I didn't. So I didn't make as much money on the commissions. Besides that, what was happening at that Radio Shack was certain people that worked there were like ripping stuff off, and the manager would get pissed off and blame people for not like watching good enough. So, and this is people he like was friends with. I felt really like, I'm not gonna like say it's this person or whatever, you know what I mean? So there was actually a lot of thievery at both of the Radio Shacks. Actually, the first Radio Shack I worked at, there was a guy that was there, and he like ripped off a bunch of shit and then quit. Anyway, So, anyway, so I'm in San Francisco working at the Radio Shack. And I sort of felt like, okay, and then I started living with a older Ukrainian person that had a room for rent in the Richmond district. And that was kind of cool, having my own room in the Richmond district. I think I was paying about $500 a month, $550 maybe. So I'm working at the Radio Shack, but I didn't feel like I was being treated well by the manager, you know? Even though I was like honest and I was trying to do as good as I could, I sort of felt like the fall guy a lot of the times. So I don't remember exactly what happened, but I ended up not working there. But I still had the place for rent. This is 2005 now. I'm getting into my late 20s, 29 years old. And I decided to go to Europe again. Because what happened was the Ukrainian guy started getting older and his health started failing. So he had to move out into a home because his health was not good. So I was like, oh, I guess I have to move out, you know? So I left that place and I was like, well, I have a little bit of money saved. Time to go not that much money though. I did not go to Europe the second time with very much money saved. So the second time I went to Europe, I went to Paris, I went to Austria and Switzerland. So I had a friend in Switzerland that I'd met in India years before that. And I had a few months of just great hiking around and biking around. And that's when I started doing social media. Because MySpace started when I was in Switzerland. I made a MySpace. I remember I was in contact with my friend Darwin, and I started using that. So MySpace, right? That's when I started using social media. I was 29 years old. Almost 20 years ago. 19 years ago. So then I was thinking about it and I was like, I got to go back to LA and start playing music again. I remember I was hiking in Austria in the mountains. I wrote this song called Sit in the Silence, and I had this vision of like having CDs for sale and just doing it right, you know, moving back to LA and just doing it right this time, right? So I go back to Sonoma County in probably August or September, and I'm moving in with my friend Dan, who had a apartment. He had a 2-bedroom, and so I took one of the bedrooms, and I started working at State Farm through a temp service, but I like was keeping the job, and then at the end of the year they had to move to their office to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I like, now if I knew about that, like now that I know about like how cool like Nashville is and stuff and Tennessee is, like I would have just moved and worked there. But I didn't want to move to Tennessee. I wanted to go back to LA. So I had a little money saved from State Farm. I'm just about to turn 30 in January, and I go back to LA 9 years after the first time I moved there. I'm staying with my friend in Venice Beach. Same person I lived with before, but had to move out when I didn't have enough money. So I'm in Venice Beach. I'm 30 years old, and I meet Jamie Soulblack probably a week after my 30th birthday. Maybe not even a week after, right? So Jamie Soulblack was this punky dude. He was like 21, going on 22. I was like 30, but I don't know, we just started playing music, and I started like living in the canals for a little while, and then I was I don't know, I was kind of like bouncing around when I was 30. I was kind of bumming around. So I was playing music with him, but like we had a lot of like back and forth where we didn't get along that well, and then we did, and I don't know, it was just kind of crazy, right? And I started helping my grandmother out because she was getting really old, and I don't know, just sometimes like people didn't have time to take her somewhere, so I would end up taking her to the hospital or taking her shopping. And it was hard because she had like a bad temper sometimes, but also she was my grandma, so I just kind of was like, okay, whatever. And then like at the end of that year, okay, actually in the summer, I'd been kind of hanging out with my friend at this really weird place in Hollywood that got condemned. But then like after a couple months, I was like, this place is too shady, right? And then my grandmother said, she was like, she told me she was gonna move into a home, and she didn't want to sell the condo, so she said that I'd be able to stay at the condo, kind of like in exchange for me helping her out a little bit and visiting her sometimes, you know. So for me, it was kind of like a big opportunity because I've been kind of quasi-homeless for a long time, and now I had a place to stay, right? And so I was like, well, now I'm gonna try to like date a little bit. So I started trying to meet some women, and I met this one girl, and she was a musician, and that didn't really work out. And then I met Susie, and I went out with Susie for like a year, and we broke up, but like we've been friends ever since, on and off, you know. So 2007, I'm living in Pico Robertson. My twin brother comes and moves out there too. And then my car was not working that good, so I was kind of running around a lot. And I don't know, it was cool having the apartment, but then I would spend a lot of time with Susie too. And in 2008, I started playing in Jamie's band as a bass player. Like, we opened up for this band called Old Man Markley, like it was one of their first shows. And now they're like kind of big. I don't know if they're big, but they're like a little bit known, right? They're kind of like punky. And that show was really fun. We kind of had a lot of sort of shows that were like okay, but I mean, it's so weird because I look on those times and like a lot of times it was a headache, but at least I was playing music, so you know, I liked playing the music. But then like around 2009, I started wanting to kind of like carve my own path, do my own material more. So we started doing more of my material in the band, but I also just wanted to start like my whole new band, right? And so I actually had a gig where I had like my friend Dan on bass and Jamie was on drums, and I started trying to kind of just do my own band. But then I'm like in my 30s already, you know, I had like tons of songs, but I just hadn't got my band going yet. But I was playing around a lot. 2009, I was working some jobs. I'd worked at this place called Dolce Cafe. I worked at this place called Superba Life. They made like pills. Let's see. I worked for the Census Bureau in 2009, and 2010 my grandmother passed away, so the condo I lived in was going to be sold, so I had to figure out where I was going to live next. And I basically stayed in that condo as long as I could, like even after I was supposed to not be there. Like right when the people were going to move in, I was like, okay, I guess I can't come back here. It's all gone now, right? And my car was working again. I moved out to the valley there's this lady that I stayed with, and I started going to this school. It was like a school where, like, if you'd been on unemployment, you could go to this school, and it was for physical therapy, but I wanted to get into massage therapy. So I started going there, and we actually did learn a little bit of massage. But after I did that for a few months and I actually graduated the program, it was just like a physical therapy aid thing. I decided that I wanted to go to Optimum Health Institute because I'd heard about Optimum Health Institute probably like a decade earlier, and I thought about it a lot. So me and my brother went there for a few weeks, and then I ended up doing this missionary program there where you do like a work exchange and you pay a lot less. So I got in really good shape there. I drank a lot of wheatgrass. I stayed there till June of 2011. I remember in 2011 I went to visit my brother in Colorado. That was one of the last times I saw an old friend of mine that lived there. I saw him from a distance and I didn't go and say hi, and I still regret that because he was with his wife, and his wife passed away a little bit a couple years after that. Anyway, so me and my brother did the road trip to Colorado. We come back. I ended up going on a little trip to Hawaii somewhere around October-ish. So now I'm 35. I'm in Hawaii. I met the singer from Everclear in Hawaii, remember? I was in Hawaii for about 2 weeks. One of the weeks I stayed at YMCA. One of the weeks I just kind of bummed around hostels. Come back, and I decided, okay, this time I'm going to move out to LA, and I'm really going to do it this time, right? Oh, I forgot to mention that in 2009 I recorded a song of mine with Peter DiStefano. So that was like a cool kind of thing I did from Porno for Pyros. So anyway, early 2012, I come back to LA. I'm on unemployment, but it's like the equivalent of like $700 a month, right? It's not very much. And I ended up getting this weekly that was like $190 a week. So that's like almost $800 a month. So it was like a little bit more than what my unemployment check was. So it's 2012. I'm staying in this weekly. It's kind of a trashy place, but there's this guy that lived across the street who my friend Dave was friends with, so we'd go hang out there. My friend Natalie lived nearby too. So Natalie's rest in peace a few years ago. Anyway, so we're